No, sorry. Cut that.
Wait, where is the post?
It's highlight 9.
It's under highlight 5.
Well, yeah, no, it's there.
Because I can't count.
How do you pronounce this username?
Ayo! Shadow.
Ow, Shadow.
Hello and welcome to Maester Monthly, your favorite pseudo-monthly podcast hosted by the moderators of the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit. Before we begin, this podcast is spoilers extended, which means material from The Winds of Winter and Game of Thrones TV show is fair game. You have been warned. My name is Michael, also known as Bookshelf Stud. I am joined today by two of the other mods whose voices you've heard before on the podcast, if you're a constant listener, as you should be. I am joined by Fat Walda and Mighty Isobel.
Hi, hello.
Hello, everybody.
I'm Mighty Isobel, also known as Isobel.
And I'm Walda.
just Walda.
Yeah, just Walda.
So today, as always, we have a ton of subreddit highlights. We've got a lot of highlights to get through today. But before we get started, we wanted to check in with some iTunes reviews and YouTube comments, because we do read those. We read them all day. I print them out, paper them, wallpaper my room with them.
They're the only YouTube comments that you should read, ever.
Exactly. If you have to read any YouTube comments, and I pray that you don't, then read ours. The first iTunes review today comes to us from Stormtheus, who says, "Never did I think I would hear Yu-Gi-Oh! Talked about on an Aswaff podcast, but these glorious people have proven me wrong. 11 out of 10 would highly recommend for both Aswaff content and Yu-Gi-Oh! References."
Wow, that's really nice.
I actually thought I edited the Yu-Gi-Oh! References out, so that's a little...
Disconcerting?
Will you guys be bringing some Yu-Gi-Oh! References to the table today? Or is that
No.
I
not
think,
in your repertoire?
we were a little old for Yu-Gi-Oh!
Did Maurice Druon write about Yu-Gi-Oh?
It was one of George's biggest inspirations.
Yes,
I heard.
yes.
The manga, obviously, not the not the American dub.
Right. No. I've barely got a fingernail into Pokemon, so we'll stick with that.
Walda, do you want to read the next iTunes review?
Sure, there's an iTunes review by Mayor K59389. I wonder if that's a zip code. Where would that be? Like Middle America somewhere. Wisconsin? Minnesota? Anyway, I love this podcast. All of the moderators are not only super knowledgeable about all things Song of Ice and Fire, but they're super funny too. I always look forward to this podcast pseudo-monthly. I don't know how you look forward. I mean, I guess you can anticipate it, but not very precisely. And can never get enough of each episode. Keep it up, all you Aegons. That's a throwback there.
Yeah, that is a vintage reference. It's really good.
Yeah.
There is an episode that's an actual reference to.
Yeah, I think it was one of the Quill and Tankards, maybe?
Yeah, go back and find it if you haven't.
I like to think it's also a reference to the Heinlein story that Eliana always references, all you zombies.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that this
catch.
is like a double-layered, complex, deep lore reference. So way to go, Mayor K59389, which is the location is Dunkirk in...
Whoa.
France?
What?
Wait,
No.
What?
Yeah, that's the U.S. postal code for Dunkirk in
Wait.
France.
No, that's...
I think.
What?
I don't know, man. I looked up 59389 on zipcodecountry.com, which seems like a reputable website.
Well, speaking of gratuitous British references, our next item in the mailbag is a YouTube comment by Niall001, who writes, "Mance is Arthur Dane, and nothing you can say can convince me otherwise because I want to believe." This is in reference to Matt's awful theory that Arthur Dane is still alive.
So what? Who added the commentary that this was an awful theory?
Yeah.
The unnamed author of the planning documents for Maester Monthly, which is actually just the bot of Ice and Fire.
That's not
It
true.
writes all of our
That's not true.
Auto moderator writes
Automod.
all of our.
No, that's not true. Now I'm upset.
You can't blame the robots. That's offensive.
Is that auto mod slander?
It is. I will defend Automod.
Our last comment for the day comes from another YouTube comment by Not Sure If Legit. I assume that's Sir Not Sure of House If Legit, who just has to say, nice.
Aw, nice.
We think you're nice, Not Sure If Legit. That was a great comment on our latest episode 14, entitled Maester Monthly.
It should be like nice.gif, and I imagine the Jaime Lannister nice gif.
I imagine exactly the same thing.
I mean, I imagine Nikolai a lot, but speaking, we were talking about James Bond today. Yeah, he should be James Bond.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He's not British enough, but
I don't know, a Nordic James Bond or whatever he is.
Befuddled Bond a little bit.
Yeah, he would be a little kind of hapless.
Yeah.
Well, as always, before we get started on the subreddit highlights, we have a little discussion question. And this one's kind of a visual one, so it's perfect for an audio medium like this. But this question was posted on the subreddit a while ago by user xmilkstashx. Wow, I didn't even notice that username. That's great. And the question is, which house has the best coat of arms in your opinion, or the best sigil in your opinion? Now, there are something like there's several hundred houses, right? I mean, there's a ton of houses, great and small. So you have a bounty of things to choose from. I don't know, guys. Are any popping out to you? Do you have any personal favorites?
Every year, I like to change my sigil to House Umber at Christmas time. Because it has those broken chains, right? And I changed my flair at the holidays to wearing the chains I forged in life. And so the coat of arms goes really well with that flair text. And so that's my favorite coat of arms, and I look forward to it every year.
Wow. That's pretty good. That's a nice personal connection, because for those who don't know, you can customize your flair on the subreddit, as long as you're at old.reddit.com.
Right, I was going to say that's really important. The new CSS, like the new Reddit format, will not show the shields with your flair. So if you want to get the full effect, you have to use the old site. So my answer is a non-answer, because that's what I like to do. So the best coat of arms is not the Stark coat of arms.
Oh, I see.
And I will defend this because I was going to say was, but it really am. I am an uber nerd. When I was in college, I did the SCA, and I was a herald, and I helped people design their heraldry to pretend like they were fake European nobility. So I learned a lot about actual medieval heraldry, and it really bugs me, George, if you're listening, that you made the Stark coat of arms gray and white together, because that is a huge heraldic no-no. Imagine being in a battlefield and you've got gray on white or white on gray, and you can't distinguish that. It doesn't look like anything. Especially if you're in the north and you're in the snow. How are you supposed to see the Stark's coat of arms anywhere? It could have been white and black, and that would have been perfect. But he had to go with, gray and white.
Gray on white.
And you can't see it. And so that's the heraldic rule, is that you so there's yellow, which is gold, and white, which is silver. And then there are the colors. And you can't put a metal on a metal or a color on a color. You can only have a metal on a color or a color on a metal.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that makes any sense. But you can have, yellow on red or red on yellow, or yellow on blue and blue on yellow. But you can't have yellow on white or blue on red.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
So the bot who made this, the Maester Monthly planning document, didn't actually know that Walda is qualified to answer the question, what is the best coat of arms?
I am.
It's not House Stark.
Yeah.
Though I'm always ready to crack on the show a little bit. Maybe George was thinking a really deep gray and then silver or white. That doesn't work either, does it?
Well, like, gray wasn't technically a heraldic color for most of the Middle Ages. Because I think gray, white, silver was all lumped together. It wasn't like a trademark where, like, you had, like, one image and you always used that image. Like, there was no branding in the Middle Ages, right? Like, you know, there was a text description and people were free to interpret that how they would. And so then there were standard words that they would use to describe the aspects of the heraldry. But other than that, you know, any artist was just drawing it based on the description. So to say that something was silver, an artist could have used white or gray or actual silver or iron or anything that was sort of that shade.
So they had these really broad kind of categories.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, then, I mean, most of these sigils are kind of, like, messed up.
A lot of them, yeah.
And the show marketing really gets us in the mindset of, like, oh, the Stark Wolf here is the Stark Wolf everywhere. But, again, anachronism.
Yeah, and actually medieval wolves are really derpy looking, and you should look those up. Not as derpy looking as medieval lions, but yes. And medieval dolphins are right out.
Just unacceptable.
Walda's Heraldry Opinions Hour. This is great.
I could talk for an hour on medieval heraldry.
This is just now Society for Creative Acronym Stories chat.
Yes. Yeah, I don't play anymore, but you never lose the... I was the one walking around the campsites yelling oyez at everyone, telling them when the feast was going to start. That was my job.
Wow, that's so exciting. We have a genuine celebrity.
Yeah, right?
Oh, yay.
Well, I don't know. I mean... I've got some that I like. There's a lot of good sigils out there, like Stokeworth, which is just a lamb with a pimp cup. There's Volmark, which is just a whale. It's just a big whale on like a plain background, like not colorless background. But I think if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be, unironically, the Tarleys. I really like that like big red archer on the green field. If I had to if I was a sort of a shitty peasant warrior and I had to wear that, the sigil, I would feel pretty good wearing that. Like I'd be like, yeah, I look cool. I have a good mascot. It's like the difference between having like a high quality mascot costume for your college football team and then having like the discount one. It makes you feel a little better to know that you've got like a badass representing you. Does that work? The green and red? Now I'm curious.
I have to see how it's
a red huntsman on a green field.
Yeah, no, technically no.
Ooh. Damn.
It's color on color.
George.
How did they render the metal? Were they using gold, silver threads? Is it some kind of dye treatment?
What do you mean?
In actual medieval heraldry history.
Well, they had cloth of gold and whatnot, and
true.
Do not substitute gold lame.
Oh.
But that's why yellow and white
Disco heraldry
also represented the metals, because it's easy to make yellow and white cloth.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. You don't have to worry about the actual silver and gold. Well, that brings us to our subreddit highlights for today. And our first one is brought to us by user Zionius _ with a post titled Littlefinger and Lysa's Secret Visit to 6 Vale Castles. Now, in this post, Zionius is citing the Lands of Ice and Fire map collection, which came out in 2012. And these maps feature maps of the characters' journeys, labeled very conveniently. So you can see where Brienne wanders while she's looking for Sansa and Arya. You can see where Sansa and Arya are going that Brienne is not. And the other characters are on there too. In Sansa's map, we see that Sansa, as written in the books, arrives at Littlefinger's shitty little castle, where he and Lysa are wed. But then, from there, they travel through 6 different castles in the Vale on their way to the Eyrie. And in the book, this isn't mentioned at all, and in fact, it seems like a retcon, according to Zionius, that this sort of tour of the Vale happened. Now, the houses that they visit at these castles, which are helpfully labeled, we know which houses they were, Coldwater, House Coldwater, House Linderley, House Corbray, House Hunter, House Melcombe, and House Waynwood. So some of those are more major than others, most particularly Lynn Corbray, who later becomes Littlefinger's basically employee. And Anya Wainwood, who Littlefinger, I believe, promises to forgive her debts, if I remember right.
That's right.
In exchange for her allegiance. Lord Linderley is a minor character, but becomes Littlefinger's friend. So it...
Wait. Lady Wainwood is also the guardian of Harry the Heir. Like, she's important. But anyway.
Yes, she is.
Anyway, that's the debt forgiveness. It's a whole scheme. But yeah, these are important places and less important places.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, Zionis points out this seems like a retcon because Sansa in Feast says she didn't know the faces of these people, Lady Anya, and the other lords and ladies.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that is what kind of intrigued me about this. Like, why do you think George would go out of his way to make Sansa's journey pass through these castles? I mean, I guess it could have just been artistic license, but it feels intentional.
Yeah, well, I've got two ideas. Just looking at this map, which is super helpful in audio, but just looking at this map, it looks like it's a winding path from castle to castle, but what they're really doing is going around that, like, mountain range on the Vale of Arryn.
Mm-hmm.
Along the coast. So they're traveling along the coast, basically, and not trying to cross over mountains. Maybe, except that that third castle really looks like it's very close to the Eyrie, and they went all the way out on that peninsula, so I don't know about that. But the other thing it reminds me of is, like, the idea of a progress, the idea that the Liege Lord is making his way through the kingdom and being visible, and that seems super consistent with Lysa Arryn's idea of what Lady of the Vale would have to do, and probably Littlefinger wants to be seen doing that too. There's all kinds of reasons to do a progress, not only just going and eating other people's food for a few weeks. And so, I mean, that's what that path makes me think of, is that custom of the progress that we're starting to see coming up more and more in the written content, as that is something we're starting to see in the Fire and Blood content, is these progresses that are really important.
Oh, that's true.
In actual medieval history, but it's cool sketching in the Vale like that, and it's a very cool catch. But also, yeah, like, what do you do with Sansa? Is Sansa just sort of tucked away out of sight? And
yeah, it seems kind of risky, right?
Right. Well, so one of the things that comes up in the thread about Sansa a little bit is that her backstory as Elaine Stone is that she was born in Gulltown, like to so that maybe Littlefinger was trying to avoid Gulltown for some reason, like to not invite suspicion, even though it would have been faster to just sail down there.
Okay, sure.
But I don't know if that's strong. Like, maybe it would have made more sense to go through Gulltown and be like, oh, I'm picking up my daughter from Gulltown.
Yeah.
I agree that it looks like the path is following the geography. It actually reminds me a lot of the coast of Wales. Well, I mean, Wales in general, but like it's not easy to get to northern Wales from southern Wales because of the mountains. The railway system doesn't connect northern Wales and southern Wales, so to get between the two of them, you have to go all the way back into England and all the way back out again.
Okay.
I know this because one time we wanted to do that, but we didn't want to spend all the time on the train, so we rented a car in England and drove on the wrong side of the road in a stick shift, so you're shifting with the wrong hand. Yeah, it's and roundabouts. It was harrowing. But that reminds me of, like, if you were trying to go from, like, Harlech Castle or something in the north down to Pembroke in the south of Wales, like, you would have to go all the way around Snowdon along the coast, like, through Aberystwyth and that sort of thing. So, like, that makes sense. I mean, you're right. Why didn't they just sail down to Gulltown and come up that way? But I don't even think that third castle and the Eyrie connect. I think that there's like still mountains in between there.
Yeah, that's what the map looks like. And, it's this mountain clan stuff. Maybe the people of the Vale
it's dangerous.
we're just like, we're not building a road through there. We're not making it easier for the people of the Fingers to get to the Eyrie. Make them go around. Make them go past all those other castles on the coast.
Yeah, and I will say also that other maps show different approaches to the Eyrie. Like, one has the Bloody Gate only approachable from the east, one has it kind of this one has it kind of to the south of the Eyrie, so you can kind of come from either east or west. So there's a certain amount of what I'm sure Gurm would chalk up to, like, oh, the monks don't know what the world looks like. Sort of that historiographical map making inaccuracy.
Or this is a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah, but it's still, I don't know, I find this interesting. The Vale stuff I'm really intrigued by. The politics and all that.
Totally.
What's going to happen in the Winds of Winter. So this, I hope at least Gurm has looked at this and gone, I wonder what else could have happened on this little trip.
So I have here another highlight. This is what most people miss about the 1993 outline by Mithras Stoneborn. This is a close and detailed read of the 1993 outline that we have, that Martin sent to his publishers to pitch the book. And the post is about tackling myths that have arisen in the fandom around what's in that letter, and what did Martin know and what did he not know yet about these characters. So it's kind of a debunking post, and it's saying, look, if you look at that letter in conjunction with the 13 chapters that were enclosed with the letter, you can dispel some of this theorizing by just looking at what was in those chapters. And even though you don't necessarily know what was in the draft of those chapters at that time, there's still ideas in those chapters that are already woven in. They're part of they're part of the fabric of the story from the beginning, and getting kind of knotted up about stuff that was missing, and trying to and looking for ways to retcon these characters as they were in 1993. It doesn't get you anywhere. So Mithras Stoneborn specifically is looking at the idea that Tyrion was not a dwarf person in this original outline, or that Cersei and Littlefinger weren't like characters in existence. What this user is saying is you have to look at the chapters with the letter and put them together to see where George was going and where he was expecting to take the story. And he specifically, like, he points out that the letter references 3 major storylines that the chapters are going to show you, right? The Stark-Lannister War, Dany's invasion, and the others, right? And so you need that content, right? In those 13 chapters, setting up the Stark-Lannister War, right? And also that he's making sure that there's a Dany chapter, and he's also making sure that there's a little bit of Old Nan in there to make sure that the others are included as part of these 3 stories. So I recommend checking out the post. There's a TLDR at the end, which, here's the conclusion, right? The 1993 outline had the chapters attached to it. They were the first chapters, and they were basically the same as published. And that means that Cersei and Littlefinger and Tyrion's physicality, even if they're not mentioned in the outline, they are clearly in those chapters, and were already part of the story as it was conceived in 1993. And it doesn't really make sense to go back and try to rebuild the drafting process as though those things weren't there, because they were. So you should check out that post.
I remember when the letter was sort of released accidentally, I think, but people really did dive in pretty deep and were like, oh, there's not even a mention of Cersei, but Jaime becomes king. This is so strange. And I think this is a good reminder that the first 13 chapters of Game of Thrones, if we include the prologue, that includes 2 Daenerys chapters. That includes Robert and Ned chatting about, oh, hey, who's that lady you slept with, Ned? Jon Snow's mother. Like, it includes those kind of really kind of crucial early scenes that seem like they've survived, that feel like they've really are part of the original story that was intended in this 1993 letter. So people have gone back and forth in the thread discussing, like, was Tyrion a dwarf in the letter or not? But his 2 chapters in the set that would be included with this, him being a dwarf is integral to that. And even before his chapters, when he meets Jon in the yard, and his shadow, I guess, is cast as tall as a king or something like that, right? Like, that's
right.
That feels like intentional imagery. So I definitely agree that Tyrion was already a dwarf in this draft, and was like that it was pretty much what we ended up getting 3 years later in the 1996 published book.
It's always fun to come at it from a different angle and test it and see if there's a different way of reading it. But sometimes the answer is, keep it simple and read the story that's there. And I think this post is a good example of reminding us to come back to the text that way.
Yeah, I agree. There's a good comment in this thread by, Amar Nanumen, which I feel like that might be a Lord of the Rings thing, but it's a little too obscure for me. But they point out that in these first 13 chapters, we get a lot of kind of archetypes, but we don't dive into some characters deeply, including this great point, I think, that Cersei in the first 13 chapters is relevant only to the extent, they say, of being queen and cuckolding the king, which establishes Robert, Cersei, and Jaime as deconstructive interpretations of Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. And there's not really a talk about her rise to power here, but there's more hints about Jaime's rise to power, which fits with the 1993 idea that he's going to be king. So I think that's a fair point, that Cersei's role expanded, but she was definitely a character. The twincest is such an important part of the Stark-Lannister war. You have to imagine he had that in mind.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's clearly part of the war, and we know that's where he's going with it, and he's, getting to know these characters, and clearly he's finding that Cersei's a pretty great driver of conflict. And also, and it makes you wonder if the discovering that how Cersei is connected to Sansa as his point of view in King's Landing made it attractive to put some of that narrative, to bring some of that narrative into Cersei's activities and freeing up Jaime to do some other troublemaking.
Oh, yeah, right. I can see that kind of butterflying, sure. With now that you have Sansa over there, you don't need... the story expands a little bit. Cersei can be a little more Cersei.
Yeah.
A little more the Cersei we know and love.
I think there's some good discussion about what Tyrion would look like if he weren't a dwarf, and how maybe he would be too powerful of a character then, if he didn't have any, like, negative societal factors working against him. Right? Like, yeah. He's a Lannister, so smart, and he's right, and he's not, like, tied down to the King's Guard like Jaime is, and it's like, so, what doesn't he have going for him? And I think that in the beginning of the book, as soon as you meet Tyrion, that it's pretty clear that he is troubled by a lot of things, and the way society and his father treat him is definitely a driver in his character. So what would Tyrion look like if he weren't a dwarf? Would he just be a misfit, and is that as powerful as
actually being targeted by systemic oppression? Like, yeah,
right. And does he have that kinship? I mean, I guess you could make him a bastard like Jon, but then that seems kind of, I don't know. He's got that kinship with Jon from the very beginning, and he can't really have that unless he is an outcast.
Yeah.
Right. There has to be something that makes him an outcast.
Yeah. More so than just my daddy doesn't like me, right? Like.
Yeah. It's a little redundant to have every character's daddy not like them. I mean, even as written, we kind of...
yeah, and yet here we are.
Definitely. Yeah. It's definitely an avalanche of bad daddies.
Speaking of bad daddies.
Yeah, speaking of bad daddies, this is a post that now some posts that we do on subreddit highlights get a good number of upvotes. You know, they're sort of on top of all time or top of this week. This one is one of the ones that I wanted to sort of pull up a little bit because it has a net 3 upvotes as of reading this right now.
Wait. I'm going to upvote it. Now it has 4.
Oh, there we go. That was a live upvote. Of course, it'll be recorded.
It's not what live means.
Yeah, it's just not the definition of the word. This is by user 14th Round, and the title, which is simple and pure, is Domerique Bolton. And they open with the caveat, a bit tinfoily, but better than most, and I want it to be true. And honestly, you don't need any reason other than that to write something, I think. This theory posits, says 14th Round, that Domerique Bolton is the first Reek.
What?
And he has 3 points. They have 3 points here. I know. There are 3 hypotheses here. 1, Domerique was fathered by a southern lord and not Roose, and their evidence for this is that he seems to be well liked, basically. That unlike most Boltons, he is likable. He doesn't have the Bolton madness.
Mm-hmm. He's not a vampire.
Exactly. He doesn't have the pale eyes and wormy lips that are sort of the traits. As far as we know, I guess. The second hypothesis is that Roose found out about this and gave Domerique to Ramsay.
Oh.
That basically, as punishment for being a bastard, Domerique was sent to his half-brother at the mill, because Ramsay wasn't at court at this point. And I'll talk about the timeline and how this doesn't really work. But sent to Ramsay at the mill, where Ramsay had his way with Domerique and turned him into Reek, basically.
Wait. The post says Ramsay Reekifies him, which alone Reekifies. That deserves 100 upvotes just coining that. I'm sorry, please continue.
I know. The lexicon of the fandom has expanded thanks to this post, and people just don't appreciate it. Yes, Ramsay Reekifies Domerique. And the hypothesis 3, which is really where I think this achieves legendary status, is that the name Reek comes from Dom Air Reek. And they point out that we don't actually necessarily know how Domerique is pronounced. Is it Domeric, as I've been saying it, and as most people say it, or is it Domerique? Could this Reek thing actually be sort of a reduction of Domerique's name? That, Ramsay stole the Bolton name eventually, but also stole literally part of Domerique's name, stripped of his identity. That's this.
Where it lands.
That's this post.
When I first opened this post, I bounced off of it for the idea that Domerique is a bastard. That without really thinking I didn't think about it super hard, but that idea of the being hung up on pure blood and punishing somebody for being a bastard and punishing somebody in that way, like, the Boltons are already awful. Like, it's just so unnecessary to add that piece of the logic to him. But the rest of it holds together really well. Like, I don't really have a problem believing that Roose gave up Domerique as a lost cause once Ramsay got hold of him, bastard or trueborn, right? And that's
true, yeah.
Because
that's almost canon, right? Is that Roose is accepting the fact that Ramsay is gonna kill his trueborn heirs?
Yeah, and then the reek coming from his name is that is a coup de grace.
So our own mod Admiral Kurd here in the comments takes it one level further, and he had some additional tinfoil for hypothesis 4 that Mance will become the third Reek. And his justification for this is he says that reification is a triad.
What a sentence.
Yeah, reification is a triad. Everything comes in threes with George, right?
It does.
That's right.
Domeric would have been a fake heir to a lordship. Theon was a fake prince that Balon wasn't recognized by anyone else as a king, which would leave us with a fake king, ergo Mance Rayder, who only Southerners considered being a king.
Wow.
Dang. That's convincing right there. Shout out to Aaron. That's good stuff. I mean, and there is some, maybe evidence for that in this form of the pink letter. We're not going to do another long pink letter discussion because we do those every other episode I think, at this point. Yeah, I mean, Mance is probably in the clutches of Ramsay, who may have been responsible for creating 3 reeks. I mentioned the timeline, and Loquacious Raven in the comments points out that Roose did give reek to Ramsay's mother when she requested a servant to help her raise their son. So Ramsay wasn't at the Dreadford yet, and you could assume this was when they were young. 14th Round does point out that this could be Domeric being sent there, depending on how the timing works out. But, it's fair that it was likely when Ramsay was younger that he first met the first reek. I don't know. The timeline doesn't quite work, or at least we don't know enough to say it's plausible.
Yeah, but really screwed up tinfoil about the Boltons is always good.
Oh, yeah, we love it. I mean, and the idea that Domeric's a bastard has been tossed around before, even without this, because he is so different from Roose. Do you guys think that's a possibility, or do you think it's more of a, Tyrion and Tywin?
Well, why would Roose be so cavalier about his heirs, right? What? It's he doesn't care about his legacy at all.
It's really weird because he seems like such a min-maxer most of the other time. He plays to win, but then, if this is Crusader Kings, you take care of your heirs,
Yeah.
Not if you're a vampire.
What's?
No.
Well, okay, yeah.
Well, but there's also, I mean, it matters that Domeric is trueborn because there's this messed up idea in the Bolton house story that Ramsay is messed up because he's a child conceived in sexual assault, right? And that alternatively, Domeric is an okay kid because he wasn't conceived that way. That's BS, right? But that idea seems to be there in the text, right? That it seems to be part of George criticizing the rape culture of Westeros by saying, look what happens when you do this. You get a Ramsay, right? And
yeah, look at the violence inherent in the system.
Yes, that.
In a weird sort of eugenics-y way, almost.
That, yes. So it's not great. So if you make Domeric a bastard, do you fix some of that? That's not great.
Oh, yeah.
But kind of not there either.
Then on the other hand, you've got Jon, who is presumed to be a bastard, but we see isn't really corrupt or bad. I mean, he's a pretty decent guy. I'll give him that. He's good but
enough.
then are we gonna find out that he actually was conceived in wedlock and he is legitimate? And now you're ruining that, right? You're saying, oh no, that's psych. He wasn't a bastard. He is noble and
yeah.
When you get down to it, I mean, this is kind of a heady and dark topic, but of the children in A Song of Ice and Fire who are sort of conceived out of violence, you could argue that Daenerys is probably the best counter. Although even then, it seems like she's going George is sort of pushing her story in the angle of her becoming an ironic villain. Oh no, she looks like a villain now. but that, she was that the Mad King and his wife were not having like a healthy consensual relationship.
Plus, Blood of the Dragon may not work the same.
There's
sure,
also that.
Targaryen bastards
yeah.
are definitely not looked down upon as much as it seems bastards are in general in Westeros.
Yeah. Which
Blood of the Dragon.
Yeah, I mean,
again.
so look, I think that if we were to sum up this post, is that there's more going on here than meets the eye. There's a lot under this post's skin,
Yeah. You'd have to to peel back the layers, the dermis and the epidermis,
like an onion.
Exactly like an onion.
Reek is an onion. He has lots of skin and he stinks. So, Walda, do you have any subreddit highlights that you would like to throw on the table?
We have a post by user OwShadow entitled "A Closer Look at Miranda Royce." So this user OwShadow has been looking at different characters, I don't know, kind of sidekicks kind of people, right? Like Garrus Drinkwater, Hyle Hunt, Pate. So now they're looking at Miranda, and the gist of the post is that Gurm is introducing Miranda to be a sparring partner for Sansa so that she can hone her manipulation skills, right? Her courtly wiles.
Yeah.
So they say that Miranda Royce is the first significant challenge Sansa's having as a manipulator, as a player in the Game of Thrones. And it's sort of her interactions with Miranda, she's not being supervised by anybody, right? It's just like two girls hanging out, talking about boys. So she doesn't have anyone there to help guide her in her lies or her, how much information she gives out. So Littlefinger warns her, "Sooner or late you must meet Miranda Royce," Peter had warned her. "When you do, be careful. She likes to play the merry fool, but underneath she's shrewder than her father. Guard your tongue around her." So she is a challenge for Sansa, or Elaine in this case, because she is clever. She's trying to get sort of the secrets out of Sansa. She's a rival, right? They're both sort of going after the same boys and the same, pot of power here in the Vale. And Miranda's really sassy. Like, she likes to kind of give Sansa backhanded compliments, like, "Oh, your breasts are good enough for a bastard, I guess." So,
Ow.
that sort of thing.
Damn.
But, anyway, and later in the post, they point out different ways in which Sansa and Miranda are sort of sparring with each other. The bastard breasts is one of them. She's prying as to whether Sansa's a virgin. They're kind of fighting over Sweet Robin's affection. They talk about how in the Winds of Winter chapter, I think that's where it is, where they're running up to the castle, like Miranda challenges her to a race. And then they get there and Sansa realizes that Harry the Heir is there and she's going to be meeting him for the first time, and that her hair is a frightful mess after all the running. And, is that Miranda setting that up? Like, did Miranda challenge Sansa to a race to get her hair all messed up so that she would look unkempt when she met Harry for the first time? Anyway. So it's just sort of pointing out all the ways in which Miranda is being wily and, pointing out that Miranda knows more than she lets on, and that maybe we'll get to see more of Sansa developing her manipulation skills in these interactions.
This is great. This is Heather's in the Vale.
Yeah. See, I was actually thinking Mean Girls, but that's probably closer. Yeah.
I was also thinking Mean Girls. I just couldn't think of Rachel McAdams' character's name. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, everyone should just go read this post because it really does highlight all of the things that Miranda is doing and provides some good color commentary on, like, why would she say this? What is her goal in saying this? Probably my favorite point is the constant insinuations about Sansa's virginity, a lot of emphasis on sex, and like just really randy talk, including asking Sansa about what Littlefinger's schlong looks like, which, like, first off, if Miranda actually believed that Littlefinger was Sansa's father, that's a fucked up thing to ask. Like, that's
even
so
in Westeros.
Weird. Yeah, even in Westeros, that's weird. And Sansa, I mean, she's a little grossed out, but I don't think she's grossed out enough to convince a smart person like Miranda. Like, I don't know. There's Miranda accidentally taps into the really weird, complicated things that Littlefinger is doing to Sansa, and that in particular just stood out as like, yeah, Miranda's really trying to get under her skin, trying to figure out what's going on, and maybe Sansa's not quite picking up on it yet.
This post is messing with my idea that Miranda can be Sansa's friend, because I want Sansa to have a friend.
Yeah.
My heart is in conflict with itself.
But wait, George really does know what it's like to have been a 14-year-old girl.
Does he?
Like, I feel this, right? Like, it's that catty girl that you want to be your friend because she's popular and she knows stuff, but then, like, really she's just going to throw you under the bus because she likes the same guy that you like, and...
No, I don't want that to be who Miranda is!
Of course!
Oh, no!
Of course he's going to fall in love with Sansa, and then, like, she's going to get ticked off and do something bad, and then...
I think that it helps a little bit that Maya Stone also exists and is clearly a way better person than Miranda Royce.
Yeah.
And could be like the true friend here, although she isn't quite on the page as much.
Yeah.
But it is very like high school, isn't it?
Wow. I want this post to be about their friendship, and that like they both Miranda and Sansa are in this conversation, and they have certain like women's work they have to be doing in this conversation for their own houses, and I want them to be finding a friendship with each other in spite of having to do that catty work also. That's what I want this to be. I don't know if that's on the page, but that's what I want.
I think the wrench in this, though, is that Miranda might know that Elaine is really Sansa.
Yeah.
If she's Elaine, she's not as much of a threat.
Yeah.
But once she's Sansa, now, like, she has a title, she has, like, clout, she's better positioned to marry and to take power, and now she's a huge threat to Miranda, presuming that she's going to stay in the Vale, so I can't see that turning out good.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a really interesting thing at the beginning of this post, pointing out that Miranda is actually kind of a mini Littlefinger.
A little finger?
Yeah, she's a a party-sized finger. They're both shameless. They like mock people, and they like to make these sort of slightly rude jokes that push you a little bit. We all know people like that. They are, very immodest.
Yeah.
Look fairly inoffensive. As Littlefinger says, she likes to play the merry fool. And an interesting thing that stood out that I hadn't noticed before is that they're both quote unquote responsible for their respective marriage partner's death. Miranda Royce had a husband, and I think he died mid-coitus.
She fucked him to death. Yeah.
Yep, that was it. That was the one. Yep. So there's Yep. So there are these interesting parallels between Miranda and Littlefinger, such that you could almost see Miranda as like a mini boss for Sansa, in the sense of the arc going forward, that as Sansa meets Miranda's challenge, she grows beyond what Miranda is to meet like Littlefinger on his level. That's kind of a very Final Fantasy way to break down like these kind of I don't know, very soft power traits. But
I can live with that if there's some hope that Sansa like can turn the situation around and recruit Miranda as an asset to her cause.
I mean, like, wouldn't it be great if Sansa refuses to marry Harry and like marries Miranda to Harry. And
I thought you were going to say marries Miranda.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, I'm in for this story.
actually, I mean, why not? Like,
Someone write that one.
Stop looking at me.
nah, you can't post that to the subreddit, but you can DM us.
Right, yeah, no. This is going to be a reoccurring theme, this cast.
We're now a Slashcast.
Oh boy.
One of my favorite things in this post is pointing out, and this is a stretch, but I love this kind of analysis because it's like there's not a lot of projecting. There's not a lot of, guessing what's going to happen next so much.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows Sansa's going to go up against Littlefinger at some point, so like that's not a stretch, right? It's analysis. It's really looking deep at what's there, right, and trying to get at it and tear it apart,
and looking at how it works and what the pieces are of the coming conflict.
Thematically and like mechanically, yeah. But there was one thing in here that's a little bit of a stretch, but I like it, and it's talking about how Miranda keeps insisting about the virginity. And she's, talking about how Sansa's so innocent. But if she knows that Elaine is Sansa, then she knows that she's actually technically married to Tyrion. And who wouldn't believe that they didn't have sex, right? And that's the reason why she keeps, pushing that point. But the quote from Miranda mentions cold feet. So she says, why then they must confess all the wicked things they want to do? Not you, of course. I can see how virtuous you are just by looking at those rosy cheeks and big blue eyes of yours. She yawned again. I hope your feet are warm. I do hate bedmaids with cold feet. And Our Shadow is implying that Miranda specifically uses that phrase, cold feet, to hint at the fact that Sansa ran away from Tyrion's marriage.
Oh. That is a nice catch.
Yeah.
So it's just one more hint, like, I know who you are. Mm-hmm. Right? Like.
Mm-hmm. She slips a note under Elaine's door that says, like, you don't belong here. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think there's so much here. Just in these. And this is all from, like, what, one chapter, maybe? 2 chapters? Yeah, it's basically all from Elaine 2 in A Feast for Crows. All of this Miranda stuff.
And I think the Winds of Winter chapter.
Yeah, some of
that's true. Yeah, like the Harry the Heir stuff, especially. But it's, there's just so much happening in the Vale with these kind of characters. They're just so interesting. It makes me even more excited.
There's one thing this post is missing, and it's lemon cakes.
That's a great. Do we know Miranda's opinion on lemon cakes?
I don't know. We know Lysa's opinion from the show. Is that canon?
We should ask George that at the next convention. George,
no.
George, was Lysa's statement about lemon cakes from season 4, episode 8 canon for the books as well? So one particular highlight very recently on the subreddit that deserves some mention is a post by user Tomaris or Thomaris.
Tomaris.
Or Thomaris. Tomaris. Yeah.
It's a good username.
Whose flair, by the way, before we talk about the post, whose flair is Harrenhal, where the whores went.
Ooh.
Get it? Like the house horror who built
it works
Harrenhal
on many levels.
House went. It's a good one.
It's a layered onion of a flair.
Of course, Tomaris is familiar with clever use of minor house names because Tomaris has created a spreadsheet of every single Song of Ice and Fire character.
What?
House. Let's see. They have the named, unnamed, nicknamed characters, and drumroll, the total characters in the series, including all of the auxiliary works, Hedge Knight, all that shit. 7,288 characters.
Wow.
7,288 characters.
They're all on the spreadsheet?
All of them are in this spreadsheet. It takes a long time to load, so Tomaris actually recommends downloading it instead of trying to view the Google Doc.
Yeah.
Because it is powerful. And now basically the reason they did this is because another user, Minotaur, had done a list like this a while ago, but it wasn't updated with information from the World of Ice and Fire.
Oh, yeah.
Which obviously is a big chunk of characters. So Tomaris went in, kept the same formatting, but just added everybody. everybody. And they include human characters. Then there's also named creatures and animals, like giants, children of the forest, direwolves. There's a spreadsheet of all the known gods. And then there's a spreadsheet about a couple sheets with things like statistics and cultures and titles, like how many people are sirs and lords.
Whoa.
All of these fun data points.
Wow.
It's a lot. You could probably spend all day rooting around in these spreadsheets.
Yeah.
The user also found errors on the Wiki of Ice and Fire
Yeah.
while searching for this, which I think is hilarious.
And not
a couple
surprising.
very minor things. Yeah. Mixing up half a dozen and a dozen, you know.
Wait.
One fun fact that jumped out a little bit, 75% of the characters are male. 75% of all people in the world of Ice and Fire are male.
Do we think that's true, or do we think that it's just 75% of the characters who turn up on the page are male?
Right.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Because that's interesting. That's
I wasn't trying to imply...
it's another world. They've got long seasons, but maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have actual gender parity. But
Yeah, don't get me into the biology there.
no,
Because I will analyze
Is that a
it.
bad idea?
Did you know that the series names 3 different Swords of the Morning?
What?
Really? Only 3?
3 Swords of the Morning.
Wow. Where is that in the titles?
Yeah, it's under titles.
Oh, cool.
But it also only
See,
mentions
this is what's so exciting.
6 novices in the Citadel. So obviously, like, that's not all the novices there are. It's just all that are mentioned.
I haven't touched pivot table in years, but a pivot table wizard could generate content from this for weeks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
You've got the cultures as well. Like lists of characters by culture, basically. Which percentages, have the most representation, basically.
It's amazing.
Another one that I found interesting was that there are 1,962 different forenames for the characters. There are almost 2,000 different first names in the series. Some, obviously, like John and Robert, are similar to our world. But
Right. 900 of them are just various spellings of Targaryen names.
That's
One letter changed.
So we wanted to give a big shout out to Tamaris for putting all of this together, because it's such a good resource. And hopefully, Tamaris has said that when Fire and Blood Volume 1 comes out, they will keep this updated.
And so it's going to get a lot more skewed to the Targaryens, huh?
So download it now.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then compare. And if you're looking for baby names,
Ooh, yeah, there you go.
if you're looking for baby names, there are the top 10 most common female and male names in the series. Walda is there.
How about Khaleesi?
Walda is
Khaleesi
there.
one of them?
No. Arya is also not one of them.
What are the top 10 female forenames then, Walda?
All right, Jane is the top. Actually, Jane and John are the top
Right.
male or female and male name respectively. Then Alice and Alan. I like the parody here. The female names continue. Alice Ann, Bethany, Walda, Alyssa, Jocelyn, Willow, Wyla, Bessa.
Willow. Hey, that's pretty good.
Willow, I know.
Willow.
That
Willow.
was interesting. Willow and then Wyla.
Huh. Okay.
There are wow, yeah, if you look up Willow on the wiki, there's a bunch of them. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
So, expecting parents, you have a good list of names to choose from. The male forenames in the series as listed, like you said, John and Alan are the top 2. That's pretty normal. Brandon, then Pate.
Like the pig boy.
So, yeah, just like the pig boy. Then Garth, interestingly enough. And then Robert, Aegon, Robin, Humphrey, and Walder.
Walder. Or if you're a parent, an expecting parent who maybe wants to make sure that your child does not have a Game of Thrones name, this could also be useful.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you do not want to give them the name. In case you were considering the name Aegon, you might want to avoid that. It's actually a character in this book series. Don't know if you've heard of it.
So there is a post by D-Pate10.
One of the Pates.
Right, one of the Pates, the 10th Pate, apparently. And it is entitled Robert, Littlefinger, and Their Manic Pixie Dream Girls. So the post is just about basically how Robert obsesses over Lyanna and kind of makes her out to be this perfect girl that she's not really because he doesn't really know her. Same thing with Littlefinger and Kat, and that he imagines that Kat is like Jenny of Oldstones from the songs, and she's perfect, and of course she wants nothing to do with him. But our own Joe Magician points out in the thread that if Robert is really interested in Lyanna because of his friendship with Ned and wanting desperately to make them actual brothers, he wonders if that makes Ned Robert's Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
What?
Or Manic Pixie Dream Boy, as the case may be.
And the thread continues with some people really starting to buy into this. Most significantly, N7 Greenfire, who really effort posts this in a comment. And first lays out the, I'm going to use open quote here, evidence that Ned and Kat were not, like, super sexually active.
I feel like N7 Greenfire, like, convinces themselves as they're writing this post.
That's exactly what happens. At the end of this long comment, N7 Greenfire says, I was half joking, but I think Ned might actually have been gay.
It starts as tinfoil and ends as solid as iron.
Yeah. And, you know, it's these quotes from Kat that's like, I gave my maidenhood to this solemn stranger, that Ned, like, never stays in bed with her, that it was more duty than passion, but that there was, and that out of all the years that Robert and Ned knew each other, Robert couldn't think of a woman that Ned fancied, which you could argue is just Robert being self-obsessed, but, you know, that maybe Ned was never all that interested in women, and maybe what he was looking for was really in front of him the whole time.
Yeah, and we're actually in Ned's head, and he doesn't have sexual thoughts about anybody.
That's true. Yeah.
Not really, yeah. I think he, like, recognizes that Cersei is hot when she tries to seduce him, but he's like, no, thank you. You know, he's just uncomfortable. He's not like, I must resist the temptation. Which you could, again, chalk up to Ned just being, like, a real stand-up guy who doesn't get seduced.
Or don't sheath your sword and crazy.
Oh.
As they say in Westeros.
Right.
Yeah. It's funny because the discussion actually really kind of evolves. We're not going to read every comment in here, but it becomes this whole thing about sort of male companionship in Westeros, and the line between homoerotic behavior and friendship, and some people suggesting that maybe Ned just really is kind of is asexual personally, that he's just not really interested in that. That's how he, that's who he is. But I don't know. It's such a fascinating discussion that really comes up in this thread, and it's all because Matt was just making like a dumb joke about Ned being Robert's Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
All Ned could do was take her in his arms and hold her while she wept. He looked across the room at Robert, his old friend, closer than any brother. Please, Robert, for the love you bear me, for the love you bore my sister, please.
Oh, closer than any brother.
Mm-hmm. Does that include Targaryens and or not Targaryens? Does that include Lannisters and
Lannisters and Targaryens? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there is maybe something to the whole, like, it's something that's actually missing in Aswath, is the sort of historical homoerotic soldier narrative. You know, that is something that was totally a thing. Probably the most pop culture example is like the Spartans, but it's been a truth basically as long as there's been male-only standing armies, I think.
Mm-hmm. And later on, Duck Me Yellow actually says that it may have something to do with the culture of the North, that you've got male companionship viewed as a power thing. So, they've got these bromances going on in the North. Very, very deep relationship.
Yeah, you can look at it with Jon and Robb as well. They have a really complicated, interesting relationship. And even the way Theon feels about Robb later, when he's at Winterfell mourning the fact that he betrayed him, and he's like, I should have died with him. It's a type of love, certainly, even if it's not like a sexual thing.
Yeah, N7 Greenfire even goes through and sort of details all of the things that Ned did that maybe weren't great ideas, but did for the love of Robert.
Yeah.
And for, like, his loyalty to Robert.
What Martin does in Ned's point of view of giving us, like, we talk lots and lots and lots about the politics around Ned and the decisions he should have made and how he gets enmeshed in Littlefinger's schemes, but a lot of the Ned chapters are a character portrait of Robert Baratheon and are exploring Ned's changing relationship to his best friend, his BFF. But that's what Ned's chapters are about. Are who is this man who is king and became king and how did he change, and it's this character study of him. And it creates this very rich relationship that there's a lot of ways to read the relationship and a lot of ways to identify with it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think that's something you find a lot in, like, mystery stories, is like, if there's a dead person, a lot of the story is an exploration of who this dead person was. Yeah. And Robert, I mean, he's dead eventually, but that, so much of Ned's story is trying to figure out who Robert is now and trying to figure out what's happened here. And
I wonder if, we were talking about the 13 original chapters before. I mean, I wonder if in the very first instance, the idea was that Ned would be discovering a character portrait of Jon Arryn, right? But you get about a minute you get a couple pages into Winterfell, and it's like, oh, no, this relationship with Robert Baratheon is much more interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah, Jon Arryn. That's true. Because with him, like I said, he sort of falls by the wayside.
Yeah,
that's interesting. It's much more about Ned's brotherly relationship with Robert than his fatherly relationship with Jon Arryn.
Jon was just the vehicle to pull them together.
That's right. He was the magnet, and they were steel. The true steel in Robert's case.
Oh, help.
This is another quote. He found himself thinking of Robert more and more. He saw the king as he had been in the flower of his youth, tall and handsome, his great antlered helm on his head, his warhammer in hand, sitting his horse like a horned god.
Muscled like a maiden's fantasy as well. I mean, that's a pretty fantastic line right there. Yeah, Ned really does look on Robert fondly.
Does anyone else deliver body commentary to Robert the way that... Does anybody else do that besides Ned? Too fat to wear that armor?
I think the only comparative thing we get here is Brienne and Renly. Brienne thinking about Renly and how handsome and cool he looked.
Yeah.
And she compares him to she compares Gendry to Renly, and Gendry is Robert's. And so is Brienne the Ned to Renly to Renly's Robert? Fuck. I got lost in that, I'll be honest.
Wait, I'm confused now.
Are you just reading names off the spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's right. John was the Alan to Jane's Alice, I think.
It's all Aegon's to me.
So, as people may have heard, we've talked about on several casts now, there is a new book coming out soon, almost a month from now. It is not The Winds of Winter. It is Fire and Blood Volume 1, which is the first part of the Gurmarillion, where he lays out this sort of history of the Targaryen dynasty. And our very own, the mightiest of Isobels, has been doing an awesome series of posts on a weekly basis, right?
They've been going up every week.
And they've been basically kind of a roundup of different topics from Fire and Blood.
Yeah. I've been, I basically took the outlines of the Targaryen section of Ice and Fire, and the World of Ice and Fire, and I'm making a thread each week for different topics that are that I think are going to be covered in fire and blood. So there's a thread for Dragonstone because the Targaryens were on Dragonstone for 130 years, and there's a thread for Aegon the Conqueror because he was king for a while. And I'm working my way through to
He did stuff.
he did things. And I'm working my way through to Aegon the Third, which is where Martin has said that Fire and Blood Part 1 will end. And I'm hoping to kind of wrap that up right around the time that the book is released. So the week that we're recording this is the week for Good Queen Alysanne. And that's the thread that's up this week. And everybody should hop in and check them out and find out what crows of the past and present have been saying about House Targaryen and the exciting events therein. And check out the tinfoil. Someone may turn out to have been right when we get all the new content, and that'll be really cool. We'll be able to give them proper credit. And I'm just hoping to surface some of this. And I'm just hoping to surface some of this content that we've got like deep in the subreddit archives, because there's a lot of cool stuff, and people are bringing very cool new discussion to it with all of the information we now have from the histories and from Duncan Egg and from the new sample from Fire and Blood. It's exciting.
It is, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of gems in these threads, mostly, comments and discussions from some folks who are newer to the subreddit, some names who've been around for forever. We wanted to maybe just talk about a couple of them here on the cast, and we might do sort of a bigger roundup as we get closer to Fire and Blood.
Sure, if there's interest, yeah.
Yeah, if people are down for it, we'll do a whole Fire and Blood cast. But, so one that stuck out to me is a comment by Bennings463, and they're actually replying to something Brendan B. Fish was saying, but we don't really care what he has to say. And this is in the thread, let's discuss Sons of the Dragon, Aenys the First, and Maegor the Cruel. So this is all a thread all about Sons of the Dragon, which you may remember from the Sons of the Durgan live stream that we did many moons ago. But Bennings463, their comment is about how Aenys and Maegor don't really feel like real people because they're more concepts than people. That Aenys is peace and reconciliation to its extreme, while Maegor is fire and blood to the extreme. And that this, in turn, ties into Dany's story and some of the Targaryens we see on the page in the main narrative. I just thought that was a good one. I mean, it sums up very well what Aenys and Maegor are there to do, right?
They're setting out the lines of the Targaryen dynasty's conflicts with their people for the next few generations.
Feels almost like history in the Bible, right? Where it's like very, very specific stories to make a point about something that happens later, right? Like,
they're kind of allegorical, maybe.
That's a great point. Yeah, it is very... And the good but not the good brother, like the two brothers who couldn't do anything, really, between them. And then after them comes the conciliator who unites concepts in Jaehaerys. And this was in a conversation about why Sons of the Dragon maybe people didn't enjoy it as much. Yeah. And it was that Aenys and Maegor are these sort of concepts made flesh. I do like the description of Aenys as a weak-willed but well-meaning authority figure. And that Maegor's story just amounts to him doing more and more ridiculously evil shit, pissing off everyone, even the Iron Throne, an inanimate object, and everyone turns against him. It is a little over the top, maybe.
Plus his name is The Cruel, and no one ever uses his name again.
So this is admitting to some serious nerdery, but I watched the Blu-ray special features for season 7 recently. Yeah. Specifically, they did like a 45-minute history of Valyria. Not history of Valyria, like Aegon the Conqueror and his sons. And the voice actor who played Viserys,
Harry Lloyd,
whose name I can't remember. Thank you, Harry Lloyd. Yeah. Did the voice acting for some of it, but as Viserys. And as Viserys, he describes Maegor as the Wise. Oh, I don't know why people called him Maegor the Cruel. It was slander. He was Maegor the Wise.
Oh, that's great.
Fantastic. Can we make Harry Lloyd James Bond? I might
Only if he keeps the wig.
This comment, it introduces us to an idea that, as these threads have been posted, users are showing up to talk about this transition that's happening in the timeline where Aenys and Maegor rule, and they have some problems in their reign, and the discussion extends into the next thread, which is about the Faith Militant. Right? It continues to talk about that conflict that the whole kingdom kind of fell into, or that kind of consumes the history.
Definitely, yeah. There's another good comment. I think, Walda, you had pointed this one out about the Faith Militant.
Yeah, so I liked this one because I've been trying to figure out Crusader Kings 2 because I really want to.
Yeah.
I really want to play the Game of Thrones mod for it. So I found
yes.
we watch a lot of Many a True Nerds video game streams. Big fans of John and Claire. Anyway, so John started doing Crusader Kings 2 video, so we've been watching that in the evenings, that and The Good Place, and it's fun because it's like this twisted history. But if you learn anything from Crusader Kings, it's that you really have to pay attention to your progeny and who has a claim on your titles, because if you have lots of children and they go and marry into other dynasties and then now they come back trying to claim your territories, that's bad, because the whole point of the game is to make sure that your dynasty is, controlling as much as possible. So in this comment, Av the Marsupial points out that possibly the Faith Militant uprising saved the Targaryen dynasty.
Ooh, hot take.
Because polygamy might be fine when you're one of the 40 families who rules Valyria, but it's more trouble than it's worth when you're one of one kings on the Iron Throne. Anytime there's been more than one line with a claim on the Iron Throne, there's been either a war or a serious succession crisis. Multiple lines cause trouble. By limiting Targaryens to one spouse, the possibility of a major conflict decreases dramatically.
Yeah. There it is.
That was a really good take.
Yeah, it's such a good comment because it's totally true. I mean, it's something George does again and again. Aenys versus Maegor, Aemon versus Balon, Daemon versus Daeron, Jaehaerys versus Rhael, literally fucking everybody. It's over and over again. And obviously that's without even bothering with polygamy. It's hard to imagine the sheer, mess that would come of every Targaryen king having 3 or 4 wives with different favorites. It's what happened with Aegon the Unqualified, or whatever his name was, who legitimized all of his bastards. That's exactly the problem that we're talking about here, is having all these legitimate children running around.
Right.
Nope,
so unless you have what's its face, where you have to split up your land.
Gavelkind?
Gavelkind. So unless you have Gavelkind and you have to, then everybody is fighting for that one throne.
Yeah. Crusader Kings is a great lesson in just some good terms to know, maybe for the inheritance laws in Westeros. You can recognize that Viserys' council was all about agnatic agnatic primogeniture versus agnatic cognatic. Am I getting that right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Isabel's shaking her head at us.
You can have a shrug.
We've all read Crusader King or Cursed Kings.
That's right.
Crusader Kings.
We've all read the Crusader Kings novels by Maurice Drouin.
Right. It is really fun watching the series though, because it's like an alternate history. At the moment, the Holy Roman Empire owns all of mainland Europe. It's France disappeared.
Nice.
Okay.
It's all Holy Roman. And the Holy Roman Emperor is an 8-year-old whose only trait is affectionate. And so as soon as that happened, I was like, it's Tommen! And he has his kitty cats! And he's the Holy Roman Emperor. So I'm kind of rooting for him.
That's adorable. I mostly play the Game of Thrones mod on Crusader Kings, but when I did play Real History, I played as an Irish petty king and conquered Britain.
Nice.
And basically that's the only thing I do in that game is just get revenge for centuries of wrongdoing.
Karma. Yeah,
it's great for that. Yeah.
In this series, John started as Cornwall because it was the smallest territory. And so now he has the Empire of Cornwall.
Cute. Well, talking about these sort of marriages and these heirs and stuff, there's another good comment in here. Isabel, did you want to bring that one up?
This comment This comment is in the Visenya and Rhaenys thread, and it's by Giant Spider. And he or she points out that this ongoing conflict is due to a long-term essential interest of the Citadel and the Faith and House Hightower, who they call the Old Town Triad, to eliminate dragon magic. This thread is about the power of women in Westeros and the power of women in House Targaryen, and that you have this faction in Westeros that wants to keep dragon magic down, and they know that they need to suppress dragon queens, right? And so that's a way of reading the story of what's happening between Visenya and Rhaenys, like showing up on the shores of Westeros with Aegon as co-conquerors, to the point that we get to the Greens and the Blacks, and Princess Rhaenys gets cast aside, right? And that this is a long transition over this period of history, and so Giant Spider sees this like particular faction that is invested in limiting the power of Targaryen queens and limiting as a way to limit the power of dragon magic.
They make a good point that no matter how tinfoil you want to take it, a dragon queen is basically the antithesis of like the conventional strong man lord model in Westeros, because she doesn't need strength of arms to rule. She just has a dragon, and it doesn't matter what gender she is because she has a dragon.
It is the equalizer.
It is. I mean, this is something we talked about. We've talked about, Eliana in particular has talked about the idea of dragons as kind of as an equalizer. Yeah, as when Alysanne has her dragon, she's just as powerful as a king, because who's going to mess with her? She's got a dragon. And
this post went up just a couple days before Martin posted his Fire and Blood sample, right? So we didn't even have the part about Alysanne and her dragon when Giant Spider wrote this, right? So I don't know if they looked into the fires and saw dragon queens, but it's right on point. It's great.
Right. I like it too with the symbolism when the story about the dragon eggs coming from the moon, right? Or the dragons hatching from the moon, and like the moon has always been this symbolism of like female, right? Like power.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of ties there to women and women's power.
Yeah.
And dragons.
Yeah, I mean, Moonblood is the Westeros slang for like a period, right? I mean, that's there's definitely an association there.
Well, so I would encourage everybody to check out the Fire and Blood threads and hop in. They're all still good threads that you can discuss in.
And these go up every Monday, is that right? Usually?
I usually post them on Monday. Unless there's some like big discussion going on, and then I might put it up on Tuesday instead. And that's assuming I get it done on the weekend. But yep, look for them on Monday mornings. Look for them on Monday mornings, and they're called Fire and Blood is Coming. Let's discuss, and there's the topic, and all kinds of old threads and comments are posted, and there's some really great stuff that deserves a second look, and will. Makes a good intro for getting excited about the content we're going to get.
And it's great if you're like me and you don't actually know that much about the Targaryens and
that's
all
me
of that
too.
History that happened.
I don't know a whole lot about them. I'm learning a ton, figuring out how to put these posts together and figuring out what topics to line up. And should I do a thread about dragons? Should I do two threads about dragons? Maybe. Yeah.
I think you should do a thread about Aegon.
All the Aegons?
Yeah, do jump into the threads, and also we will likely be doing sort of bigger roundups, so let us know if you're interested in that, or if you have something you'd like us to highlight in particular and talk about, because we're always amenable to suggestions, especially when it comes to Fire and Blood. That wraps it up for Maester Monthly episode 15. You can find us on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and as always, YouTube. All of our episodes are archived at our WordPress, maestermonthly.wordpress.com. We are on social media at Maester Monthly on both Facebook and Twitter, where you can, should, and by legal requirement must smash the MF and like button. People have asked me like why I'm not swearing, even though we can swear on the MF and like button. It just sounds better, I think. It's got its own flair to it. As I was saying, if you'd like to suggest topics, questions, or a subreddit highlight, maybe an intro question that you'd like to hear people answer, feel free to let us know through whatever medium is best for you. You could send us a raven if you so desire. If you've got the time and inclination, iTunes reviews always help us out. That's one primary ways people can find us. We always read the YouTube comments and iTunes reviews. If you say something funny, we'll probably read it out loud. The odds are good. I have been one of your hosts, Michael, also known as Bookshelf Stud.
And I have been Mighty Isobel.
And I am eternally Fat Walda.
So thank you guys for joining. Thank you to everyone out there for listening. Thanks to everyone on the subreddit for creating such awesome content for us to talk about. And of course, thank you to George Raymond Richard Martin for writing those gosh darn books. We will catch you on the flippity flop.
Yeah. There was a lot of slash in that Slashcast.